welcome to the FOMO Creators Show. My name is Making Sang, first name Making. And welcome. How are you? Have you had a good week? The FOMO Creator Show is all about creating FOMO, and in business, it's a good thing. So if you want to know how you can sell out your next conference, festival, digital challenge, networking event, award ceremony, your book, your product, your service launch, you have come to the right place. Now, today I've got two incredible guests with me, the fabulous Roger Edwards and Pascal Fintoni. But before we bring them up to the screen, I shall bring up my slides. And first of all, in honouring the fabulous lionesses at the weekend, I want to ask Roger, who are you?
Who are you? Who are you? My goodness, so much enthusiasm in that introduction. I am a marketing bloke, originally from Blackpool in England, but been living up in Edinburgh for the last 30 years. And I started out as a marketing person in big corporate. And after quite a while in big corporate, got fed up with all the complexity and the bureaucracy and the bloat and the sheer muppetry of big corporate life. And about a decade ago, I decided to break free of corporate life and become a marketing consultant and speaker. I had actually done a lot of speaking when I was in big corporate. And for the last 10 years, that's what I've been doing, marketing consultancy and speaking with a emphasis on trying to keep things simple. I'm absolutely obsessed with helping people keep things simple.
Amazing. And we'll ask Pascal the same question. Pascal, who are you?
Hello, everyone. Can I just say, I love the music of the intro. It was just so good. And then the energy has been going ever since, Roger. You're absolutely right. So, hi, everyone. Pascal Fintoni, digital marketing consultant and trainer with a similar career to that of Roger's. I used to say I worked in public sector and corporate for about 20 years before launching my own agency, when I discovered that it was time to demystify online marketing. There was far too much BS, poor advice, and misinformation out there. And I've been kind of trying to explain how to get an audience via the internet, and discovering later that one way to do so is to tell better stories.
I love that. And we've got the fabulous Elaine with us on LinkedIn. Lovely to see you, Elaine. You're going to be in for a real treat this week. So do stay and tune in, Elaine. You're going to learn so much. Now, the first segment of the show is how we met. So I always like to invite guests who I have a bit of history with. And so I think this screen best describes how we met. So, Roger, I had the pleasure of hearing you speak and talking about marketing made simple. And you very, very kindly, when I was creating FOMO at the Upreneur Summit, you very kindly we interviewed, and you mentioned how I should be telling the world that I am the original FOMO creator. Do you remember that interview?
Oh, I absolutely do remember that interview. I mean, it was such a great event, wasn't it? And Pascal was there as well. And I did a chat. I did one of my speeches, which has become known as the John the Wineman speech. So I was sort of riding on an absolute wave of euphoria and meeting up with all some good friends as well. And I absolutely remember our conversation, because I sort of had been aware of you before Upreneur, but we hadn't really met in person. So when we were being interviewed, you kept referring to yourself as the FOMO creator. And it was obvious to me that there was nobody else at the time in the world who had effectively secured this niche for themselves. And it'd be probably fair to say that maybe you were a little bit unsure whether you deserved to claim that space. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, absolutely. You've thought of something really unique here, and you absolutely should claim it for yourself. And I think ever since, I've been reminding you every time we've spoken to each other, you are the original, and you were the first, and you still are the best. And There are other FOMO creators out there now, I'm sure, many of whom might have modeled themselves on you, but never, ever get away from the fact that you were the original one and the first one and the best one. And I think that interview was where we effectively had that conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that, Roger. Your check's in the post, my love. Now, Pascal, yes, I had the pleasure of hearing you speak about the power of storytelling again at the Upreneur Summit, and there was me interviewing you, Pascal. Absolutely amazing talk that you delivered there, and as memorable as Rogers, because we always remember Rogers talk about the red wine guy, and you talked about storytelling as well. Do you have any special memories of the Upreneur Summit when you spoke there?
Yeah, I mean, my memory is to actually be very much in doubt about the content of my kind of speech with regard to the audacity of claiming that there would be some lessons that could be derived from what is essentially the entertainment industry for for other kind of sectors. But I thought, well, if I don't try at least once and find out for myself whether it's just a whim and I should just drop it. And essentially, as you may recall, we went through many movies, some of them well known, other lesser known, and I was kind of showing story structure, how to engage an audience and how to frame shots and that kind of things. And it was very both practical and strategic. But my memory was this could go down very badly, because rightly so, people would say to me, you can't do that. There is nothing for us of value to learn from the world of entertainment. Go back and start again. And well, the crowd, you and Roger, many others, gave me the opposite, reaction. And since then, I've been able to introduce more and more of my passion into my profession, which I'm delighted about.
Absolutely. And yes, and you've definitely been, for all the naysayers, 100 and odd episodes later, you've got this fabulous podcast, which is what I want to talk about next. We are going to be talking about the ABCs of FOMO. So with all of my guests, I'd like them to go through the ABCs, and A being authentic authority. Now, I know that even before we put in the title of authentic into our title here, I know it kind of rubs people up the wrong way, because a lot of people are stating that they are authentic in their marketing. And I don't know about you, Roger and Pascal, I've met some of the most inauthentic people in our industry. So I was a bit reticent about saying authentic authority, because, if we are authentic, we probably don't need to say it at all, to be honest with you. But I do want to talk a little bit about Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. So from the naysayers who said we can't relate to the film industry and entertainment industry in our marketing, what would you both say to that? Roger, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about Two Geeks and Marketing Podcast and what people are to expect for those people who haven't heard of this podcast before.
I think, I have to say, I'm one of those people who gets a bit bristly when I hear the word authentic. It's a bit like when people say you've got to be more human. I always say, what the actual hell does that actually mean? But having said that, if I was to say what authentic means, it's just being yourself. It's not putting on a show, not putting on a front, not wearing a mask. It's just being yourself and not trying to con anybody. And unfortunately, we're in the world that we live in. There are quite a lot of people out there who are trying to con you out of something. Now, when Pascal and I started meeting up after meeting each other at these events that we've already discussed, one of the things that tended to happen was, of an evening, we'd find ourselves in the bar or at a restaurant, and we'd start talking about marketing and we'd start talking about films, because those were the two things that we really had in common. And there was usually a bottle of wine involved, and it usually was a bottle of red wine. And you can imagine that the conversation was quite professional and civilized at the beginning, but as the bottle of wine became consumed, we'd start to get a little bit more raucous, I guess is the way to describe it. And there was many times when we'd it may even have drifted into a second bottle, and I keep remembering thinking, we should have recorded this conversation, because what we were talking about, albeit slightly tipsy, slightly drunk, was really good stuff, whether it was marketing or whether it was about films, or a bit about the two. And let's face it, there's nothing more authentic than a couple of people having a chat over a few beers or a few glasses of wine. And I suppose that's where we always said we should do this and record it. And I think right at the very start, that was the intention. We would physically turn the camera on as we opened the bottle of wine and then just see how far we got. But then, of course, Pascal, the COVID pandemic got in the way, didn't it?
It did. I mean, we even as far as finding the venue, we found this small, I kid you not, the small castle in the Scottish borders, like maybe just a town was left. We were going to put it like a French bistro. We had all mapped out making. I kid you not, and I was going to try and convince Roger the French wine was far, far better than the foreign stuff that he keeps drinking. And then, yeah, we just got ourselves, that was taken away, like so many others, viewers and listeners, all those dreams and ambitions and plans got taken away in no time whatsoever. So what happened then? Well, we kept ringing each other then daily. It was literally a daily kind of routine of keeping our spirits up, recommending movies and TV series to watch to kill the time. And I think it was you, Roger, said, maybe this is it. This is the bit we should be recording. And then within moments, we created the show, we created the segments. We literally found we were shoehorning film marketing in, let's be frank. We thought, well, let's finish on a high and talk about a film we love. And the rest is history. 105 episodes. We were recording number 105 tomorrow at the time of this live streaming. And I'm a little staggered, actually, by the body of work we've created together.
Oh, that's incredible. And I don't know if you spotted that comment, Roger, from Simon Raybould. You're saying one bottle, really? Doesn't quite believe that.
Yeah, I think probably there's a little bit of theatrical license going on there, but I didn't want to give the impression that we were absolutely necking it back like it was going out of fashion. But if you truly wanted to be honest, yeah, there was definitely more than one bottle involved on several occasions.
Now, as well as being a host of Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, you also run your own businesses in your own right. So, Roger, I just wanted to bring up this screen just to let the world know a little bit about what you talk about when you are hired to speak, because you've spoken around the world, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, again, the pandemic sort of has changed things a little bit now, and you don't have to travel around the world as much as you used to, because more people are happy to see your face on a screen than actually to see you in a live environment. Although, having said that, maybe things are starting to go back the other way. But no, I did have a really nice run of traveling mainly around Europe, and especially to the east of Europe, the Balkans and that sort of thing. But as I said earlier, ever since I worked in big corporate, and I also worked in big corporate in the financial services industry, and let's face it, the financial services industry in the UK is probably one of the most complicated industries there is, and the marketing is horrendously complicated as a result. And I just felt always throughout my entire career that I was fighting against this complexity. And I did have quite a few successes in trying to eliminate some of this, but it was always like trying to push a very big stone up a hill and risk having it roll all the way back down, and you effectively have to start pushing it back again. And so when I made the decision to become a consultant, the idea was that the speaking would lead to clients, and the speeches that I put together were all about keeping marketing simple. Not just the language that you use, but keeping the product simple, keeping the service simple, keeping the processes simple. But I guess over time I also developed this theory that people who use complicated language in their marketing, almost by default, you can guarantee that everything else is complicated as well. And I think that if you start with the simplicity in the language, you can then make that wash through to being simple elsewhere, simple with your products, simple with your processes, and it's really come from there. And people seem to like the stories. They like John the Wine Man. They like the cat that sits on the mat. I keep getting asked to do that. The cat on the mat one is about that particular story is 7 years old, and I've done it so many times, and yet I still had a conference organizer last week. So will you do the cat on the mat? And I said, I've done it so many. Oh, we want you to do the cat. It's a bit like a rock group always having to play its greatest hits on stage. You just can't get away with not playing the some of the best bits. But no, basically, it's all about simplicity and helping people to see what good customer focus and outcome can come out of keeping things simple.
And Pascal, you've also had a distinguished speaking career as well. Wondered if you wanted to go through a little bit about the kind of things that people have asked you to speak about.
Yes, thank you very much. So, similarly to Rogers, I've worked in the private sector, I would say. I was an employee doing the very best I could for my employer to get more leads and inquiries by using, by then, digital marketing. I chose to specialize after really becoming passionate about website design in the mid-90s. And for me, it's also important to kind of clarify that when you talk about, being authentic, it requires a bit of history in terms of what you've done. So, Roger and I, through the podcast in particular, and many others, we can look back. We have a sense of origin for many things, which is why we bring in pop culture and the 80s and the first computers and the first kind of, DVDs and so on, because then you can make sense from the 80s in terms of what's happening today with the metaverse and more things. And really, my speaking career, because primarily when I launched my agency, it was really consultancy and training. It was a one to few as opposed to one to many. It began when I spoke at a big event about SEO. And that was really 2003, where I was simply telling the story of this is how we do it. So all of us in private sector, where we need to get results swiftly for the boss, otherwise I lose my job, as simple as that. So I have no time to pontificate and come up with crazy acronyms and charts and no one can understand during the board meetings. I've got to get results. So we were saying, this is how we do SEO. And I had the standing ovation, and I had people queuing up at the end asking me questions. I was thinking, that's a bit weird. And I just went back to work. And then I got a phone call for one more. And eventually the speaking really became something that I understood better, thanks to the help of people like Simon Raybould and many others. And I came up with my very first one, as in the very first one that was crafted purely for a speaking engagement, which was called Video Killed the Social Media Star. And it was all linked at the time with live streaming being released by the like of, it was Periscope then. We had Facebook Live and a few others. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, if you're going to go live on social media using video, you better do something interesting and engaging. So through the presentation of Video Kill the Social Media Star, I talk about structure, I talk about character development, hooks, and then I was able to talk about Star Wars and Mary Poppins and Back to the Future and all the others without feeling too guilty about the process. So that's how it began. And there's still moments, where I'm thinking, am I pushing my luck here? To literally talk about the latest film I've seen and deriving back again lesson for social media, for website experience, for SEO, for email marketing, and so on. And so far, it's working. But yeah, that's how it all began for me. Really being a practitioner first, paying my dues and being under pressure or getting results, sharing those stories in a very simple way, and getting the reaction from the audience, and then starting to craft, I'd say, speeches and presentation uniquely for the stage and virtual stage, of course.
I love that. And not sure if you noticed this message, Ian Farrar saying, the 80s. So reminiscing about the fabulous decade that is the 80s.
Isn't it scary how so many things happened in the 80s, and then even just today, it came up on screen that there was a song by Genesis that was called Mama, which was released 40 years ago today. That's 24th of August 1983 it was released, and I'm sitting here thinking, how can that be 40 years ago? That's ridiculous. But it happens frequently now, doesn't it, to us children of the 80s?
Oh, fabulous. Now, the title of this show today is How to Create FOMO with Film. And we've talked a little bit about Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast. I am going to point a question at you. I know it's kind of, we could go into, a really long-winded conversation about this, but are you able to sum up very quickly how we as marketers, as business owners, can learn from the film industry, how we can generate that buzz, that excitement, and incorporate it into our own marketing strategies? So, with you producing 105 different episodes of various films, I'm sure you'll have learnt one or two things about film marketing. Roger, I wondered, I'll fire the question at you first. Is there anything that we could really look out for? If we wanted to sort of delve deep into film marketing, what can we do as business owners to generate that buzz and excitement into our social media or email or however we do our marketing? What can we learn from Hollywood and film?
I think probably a very basic thing, and this applies not just to film marketing, it applies to every sector, is that you've got to know who your customer is. And I think that a lot of companies and a lot of marketers in all sorts of different industries make that basic mistake. They don't genuinely know who their target audience is. Going back to big corporate in the financial services industry, I remember a product development meeting once, and I went in and asked that question, who is the target audience? And some bright spark said something like, people in the UK between the ages of 25 and 65. And I say, well, what you mean, everybody? And that's just nuts. You can't say your target audience is everybody, because you'll end up coming out with something so generic that nobody's going to want it. And I think that film makers know instinctively who they're making this film for. It might be a very narrow audience if it's a particular genre of film, a martial arts movie or whatever. Or if it's a rom-com, it's going to have a wider audience. But you could again still probably target down to a certain level, science fiction, etc. And I think that if you understand that from a film point of view, and then have a look at how they take that product, and let's face it, the film is the product, isn't it? And then they promote that film, that product, to that particular target audience. And we've seen in the 105 episodes of Two Geeks all sorts of social media campaigns and posters, trailers, treasure hunts, but that you can always actually look at it and say, yeah, I can see that that's actually appealing to a particular target audience. And I think in the green room making, before we hit go live, we were talking about that film Everything Everywhere All at Once, and this is a film that you and I have talked about. I just didn't get it. I didn't like it. I didn't understand it, and it was just, to me, a complete waste of time. And some people might say, it must be a really rubbish film then. But actually, no, the answer is it was probably a very, very good film, but I'm not the target audience. And the film producers of that film knew who the target audience was. And the people who were the target audience lapped it up and loved it. It's just that I wasn't the target audience. So it's not a bad film. It's just that, as we say, not me.
No, absolutely. And we've got a fabulous comment from Francis. Hi, Francis. Lovely to see you. I still talk about how incredible the marketing for the Barbie movie was. They knew exactly who the target audience was. And you're absolutely right. Pascal, did you want to add anything to that? What can we as business owners learn from film marketing? Roger's brought up a very simple, as we expect from Roger, a very simple lesson, which is we've got to know who we're targeting, who we're marketing to, rather. Pascal, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think for me the lesson is around extending, the world that you're building. So that the film is obviously the end point for your audience. So in the case of our users listeners, the purchase of the product is obviously, and the use of the product is the service is what you aim for. But honestly, those filmmakers and producers are just geniuses at the lead up to the premiere, or at the lead up to the to the release of the film. They also continue the marketing afterwards by usually repurposing the feedback and comment, the star ratings and so on. The lead up is just an event in its own right, and it's been really joyous for Roger and I to study how people do it. Sometimes it's very simple. So in the case of the Blair Witch Project, it was literally pretending that the filmmakers had really disappeared and we didn't know where they were, and creating like flyers that they gave out to the public, and website with lost and found. So you kind of do something very simple, but I think for me is to start, which is sometimes we can be guilty of working so hard to create the offer and release the offer, that we don't actually invite your prospect and audience to have literally fun in a build up towards it. You can start by, in the case, so we reviewed Mission Impossible Fallout. It was just a photo of, I've got it here, a clapperboard, which I know you have on the wall as well, with Tom Cruise, of course, on his Twitter account saying, "Off we go again." And suddenly you have this movement behind you. So the lead up can be very important in terms of building the universe beyond. But in the case of one of the Batman movies, I think it was Dark Knight Rises, they would invite people to vote for the mayor of Gotham City. In the case of which you mentioned, Roger, on 10 Cloverfield Lane, there was a treasure hunt to find survival kit led by one of the characters in a movie. So you've got this participation of the audience leading up to the film being open, and then the post. In a way, I'm realizing, Roger, that when we do the marketing campaign review, we rarely get excited about post launch. We always love to see what they've done to get people to the cinema, to buy, to go online. What happens afterwards is almost the expected of the feedback, the star ratings, and so on. One thing that I will say, and I'm going to ask, because Roger, you remember them better than I do, is they also lean on their assets, and particularly the characters, and they create some really exciting visuals for the characters of the movies, which by extension could be your colleagues and your customers.
Yeah, that's a really good one, Pascal. I'm thinking about movies like Death on the Nile, not Lord of the Rings. We talked about the TV series, but it applies to the films as well. A more recent example would be Operation Fortune, La Ruse de la Guerre. The marketing created these sort of character cards for each of the main stars in the film, so that each character would have a poster and maybe a little strapline about that character. So, in Ruse de la Guerre, Jason Statham was the badass, wasn't he? In Death on the Nile, you had the singer, you had the detective, and they each have their own character card. And some of the visuals are really striking. And they all almost create this relationship for you with all the players before you've even set foot in the cinema, so that when you get to see the film, you almost feel, I know these people already, and therefore, if one of them gets killed and it's a murder mystery, that you genuinely want to know who the perpetrator was. Or if it's a heist movie, a bit like Operation Fortune, you want them to succeed or not to succeed, depending upon which side of the law you're on. And I do like those character studies, but as Pascal says, if you're marketing a company or you're marketing a product, you can do a similar thing around the personalities of some of the people involved. Tell the story of the people who built this product, who came up with the idea for the product, and how they brought it to market. And you can do those similar sort of character studies and suck people in and make them feel part of it.
I love that. And we've got the fabulous Simon again, who says, Geo got to talk about Doctor Who in this, revealing the new Doctor Who, the new companion, the new TARDIS, and even the new sonic screwdriver. You're absolutely right, Simon. And this is what what I call pre-FOMO. So this is, creating the buzz, the anticipation in the lead up to your launch, whatever your, if you've got a product or a service launch or book launch or whatever it is you are launching. As Pascal said, bringing the people in and showcasing, who's helped you to bring the launch together, and what their involvement is just so important, because it's just giving people a little insight into how the launch has come into being, which brings us nicely to the next slide, which is BTS. No, I don't mean the K-pop global sensation. I mean behind the scenes. Laughing at my own joke. So, Roger, on the left-hand side there, it shows a little insight in the kind of things that you do when you are showcasing what it is you do. So on the left-hand side, we've got Upreneur. Roger, if you wanted to talk us through, the screenshots on the left there and how you show behind the scenes through the work that you do.
Yeah, I mean, the first photograph was the Upreneur Summit. That was the John the Wine Man talk, which I was absolutely delighted. It went down so well with the audience. And again, people have asked me to do the John the Wine Man talk by name, which is so humbling to a certain extent. And I actually remember, I mean, the thing is absolutely a true story. It definitely happened. And, I might have embellished a few of the elements of it to save time, but it actually happened. But I do remember saying to my wife, I've got this idea of talking about John the Wine Man. And I just don't know. Maybe there was a little bit of imposter syndrome or something making. You know what it's like. And I said to my wife, "Do you think I should tell the John the Wine Man story? I mean, what happens if people don't get it or I don't tell it properly?" And no, she thought, "You absolutely have to do it." So then it obviously is going through the usual story of trying to find the angles in the story, the highs and the lows. I mean, a lot of people said that they thought it was a very funny talk. I've never been a natural comedian, or I've never deliberately tried to tell jokes in any of my presentations because I'm just rubbish at telling jokes. But there was a lot of sort of observational comedy in that. And to do that, so you need to test it on people and try things out. So my poor wife was obviously a guinea pig for quite a lot of that. But of course, Pascal was there as well, and other people like Richard Tubb and Chris Marr were very helpful. So I think that we've talked about films. They have test audiences for films, don't they? And sometimes they reshoot the entire ending of films because the audience didn't like I think that happened with Titanic, didn't there? Was a different ending to Titanic. And they tested it with the audience, and the audience hated it, so they did a second ending. And I think that's happened quite a lot in films. So I just make sure that I try and test the ideas on people. The second photograph was an interview that was actually in Albania. That one in Tirana, fabulous city, Albania and Tirana, and that again was more of a sort of Q&A type of thing. But one of the things that I discovered about Eastern Europe was an absolute insatiable desire to hear stories. I don't know whether it's just a characteristic of that part of the world, but I just found the reception to a good story from that particular audience was just absolutely overwhelming, and again a bit of a sort of imposter syndrome thing. The first talk I did in Eastern Europe, I was flying over and had that moment of dread, thinking, "What the hell are you doing, sat on this plane, flying to Eastern Europe to talk to an audience whose first language isn't English? What on earth do you think you're doing? This is going to be an absolute disaster." And of course it wasn't. And well, the gratifying thing was they all spoke better English than I did. But also they just love stories. And, in the UK, I think we always think, the best marketers come from the US, don't we? There's lots of the big marketing gurus from the US. But actually, I think that if you look to the East, a lot of their attention is here in the UK and France and Germany and that sort of thing, and Spain, I guess, as well. And whilst we always think we have to learn from the US, I think that part of the world likes to think it can learn from us, and that was a bit of an eye opener for me. I don't know whether that was behind the scenes making, but hopefully that gave you a flavour.
Oh, absolutely. And Pascal, again, we're drawing attention to the fabulous Upreneur Summit. And is that Jaws in the top right there?
Yeah, part of mixing passion and profession. I thought, how many times can I mention Steven Spielberg in one presentation? I think I mentioned it 3 times, because this was actually, I think it was part 2 of the presentation about the 7-story hooks that I mentioned, composition with Jurassic Park, and I think I ended up with Raiders and Star Wars. So it was all in there. But actually talking about how much I love Jaws, I hope that the line's going to allow you to see my signed poster of Jaws, which I always give with me.
Wow. Wow.
But
Amazing.
and congratulations on your posters behind you as well. Fantastic selection out there. So with regard to the behind the scenes or the making of, the power of visual storytelling, for me, everything began with jotting notes down on the notebook. And I'm a bit of a stationery freak, so I buy expensive stationery to doodle in. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It's not particularly cost effective, but and it takes me days, weeks. I mean, this one took me a long, long time to structure, to find the examples, to be happy, go up and down the emotions with the imposter syndrome and so on. And eventually, it was more because of a deadline. And the host, Chris Ducker, saying, you do realize you only have 45 minutes, not 3 hours. This is not a director's cut or trilogy. So you kind of edit down, and this is horrible, to take things out. I don't know about you, Roger, but I found it very, very difficult to take things out because you think it's not interesting, but important for the audience. But we got there in the end. I then researched the visuals. I get a lot of stimulation from visuals. And then I created the presentation, and as a style which has come out of actually having my IP stolen by obviously some very unethical individuals. I don't write anything, so they are mostly visuals and short sentences. But it also means that I can change my mind, because suddenly I am incapable of saying the same thing twice with the same presentation. The structure is still the same, but within that, I change a lot. And then for the second photo, which is a workshop situation, this is a style that I've adopted quite early on to be different, again, to have a competitive advantage. So I can't recall what the subject matter was. It was a digital marketing, so it would have been social media or SEO, website, email marketing, content marketing even. I basically take people through the framework and the structure of a real meeting taking place in an organization. So what we do for the duration of the day, this was taking place in New York, actually, I remember. Or can I just say, by the way, this is probably the 6th or 7th picture of moi. And so far, we don't have the same waistcoats. So, it's pretty good, actually. We don't have the same waistcoat appearing between the live session and the photos. Which was a lot more about the vast collection of waistcoats that I own now. And so what we do is that I say, we're going to pretend that we are all colleagues. We're all going to pretend that we're looking after this particular business. And we're going to learn together what it takes to put together a social media strategy or content marketing strategy and so on. And then at the end of each module, of course, you can flip it and make it for your own business. And this kind of semi-role play, semi-helping a real business. I changed the name, but it is a real business, so I can tell them exactly what the tensions are, what the challenges are, what their ambitions are. You find that people are a lot more engaged, and then they leave with not just the what to do, but how to do it. But importantly for me, at the end of each workshop, it creates connections, and then they can keep in touch with each other and support each other beyond the workshop as well.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing, chaps. We've talked about the ABCs, the authentic authority, BTS. No, I don't mean that K-pop sensation. I mean behind the scenes, which leads us to C, which is create content for the lurkers. So, Roger, how do you create content for your lurkers? What is it that you post onto the socials that gives an insight into what you do to get them buzzed and excited that leads them to go and slide into your DMs?
Yeah, I think again, a lot of this will still come back to understanding who your audience is and creating your content accordingly. Now, I can't remember the exact figure, but it doesn't really matter whether you're putting something on Twitter or you're putting something on LinkedIn or YouTube or whatever it might be. You will always get a rather small percentage, probably. It might even be less than 5% of people who will answer a question you ask, or will comment or reply without even being prompted. So there are people, when you post a piece of content, will immediately comment, "Love that," or "Don't love that," or "Have you thought of this?" or "Have you thought of that?" But we also know that there are a lot of people out there who are consuming your content, but they just either need a little bit more encouragement to start engaging, or isn't it that everybody consumes something like 13 pieces of content before they'll subscribe or they'll answer your call to action or whatever it might be. And so it's real little nudges like that to try and get people to just go a little bit further along the process. And quite honestly, one of the best ways of doing that, and I guess it comes back to film marketing to a certain extent, is to bring in some element of pop culture, and ask somebody a question about pop culture. And that could just be, here's a single that was released in the 80s. Do you remember it? Do you like it? Or whatever it might be. And if you ask a question, then eventually those people who are lurking or haven't replied before, eventually they will answer. And then, of course, the trick is to continue the engagement. And, as you will know, making a lot of times somebody will answer you on LinkedIn, wherever it is, they'll comment back, answer your question, and then somebody will just type in underneath, thanks for that, or yeah, absolutely, or smiley face. But then you've actually said, well, actually, what can I then follow up with? So they answered the original question, so how can I ask them another question that actually continues the conversation? Because we should always remember, and I think a lot of times people forget, is that social media is social, isn't it? It's a conversation. It's not a broadcast. And even the comments within social media shouldn't be a broadcast. It should be a two-way thing. So it always does come down to that that two-way engagement. And I think the other thing, and you just put the example up there, one of my LinkedIn posts was going on about the 4 Ps of marketing, is if you know your audience. And for me, I like to work with companies that want to simplify their marketing, is you've got to press some of their triggers as well. And there are people in the marketing industry who absolutely know that things are too complicated, or that we've forgotten what the other 3 Ps of marketing are, because all we ever now talk about is promotion, and everybody's forgotten about price and product and place. And if you post something that everybody agrees with, but probably is a bit reticent to talk about, then hopefully you'll tease them out of wherever they're lurking, behind the sofa or whatever it is. If you're a Doctor Who fan, Simon, then they will eventually come out and engage with you.
I absolutely love that. And we had a couple of comments there from Francis, who agrees. She loves calling them lurkers. Thanks, Francis. And the fabulous Guy, who says, gotta love a good lurk. Yes, we're all lurkers, aren't we, Guy? Now, Pascal, same question to you then. How do you create content for your lurkers?
Yeah, and to me, what's interesting is, lurkers for the vast majority of content consumers, it is now a reality that the many dashboards that we look at, whether that's on your website or on social media, vastly underreport the content consumption behavior. So I'm saying this as well to make sure people don't feel discouraged if the numbers look modest, because I can tell you the reality is tenfold. Just people don't feel the need to manifest how much they love, like, and enjoy your content. That's just the way it is. And for me, it's all about self-motivation. It's really tough what we do, many of us, whether actually you're working for an employer, working for yourself, it can feel very lonely. And the more I do what I do, the more I realize that I've got to find a way for my customers to tap into something that's going to get them excited to do. And therefore, the content that I do is both for my audience and for myself. I need to feel re-energized if I post something, in particular, if the number is going to look absolutely rubbish. I need to feel that it's worked well for me. And so I remain true to this kind of self-imposed mission of demystifying digital marketing, but also fighting this strange behavior, always chasing the new shiny object. So, and then for that shiny object to adopt, a strange acronym or label that is meaningless, really. And so there's back to that. And they also, how do I feel at this moment in time? So in the example that you showed a moment ago on the screen, I was hosting the last conference of a 3-year educational program in County Durham. And I felt terribly sad about it, because I wasn't sure what the future would look and so on. So I went out and recorded a 30-second black and white movie inspired by old French cinema. It was all black and white. It had a very, very sad French music in the background. And it was just me going from A to B, staring at my phone, and then revealing that I was looking at essentially an invitation to go to the last conference. So, you had the black and white styling, you had all kinds of things. And then the next one to that is also, I get really excited, and that's born out of, the two Geeks and Marketing podcast. I get really excited about anniversaries, meaningful anniversaries. And, at the end of April of this year, we celebrated 30 years of public internet. And it just boggles the mind, that it's 30 years and what we can do today. So I was compelled to create essentially a trailer, like a movie, to say, and by the way, do you realize it's been 30 years and let's find a way to celebrate together. So I stick to my mission, but I also lean into my emotions and what I want to be seen to be reacting to at the same time. I don't tend, and we don't do that even with the two Geeks and Marketing podcasts, I don't tend to lean on, keyword research and trends and that kind of things. I mean, you can do that if you're in a sales kind of state of mind, but if you really want to engage an audience, you've got to go elsewhere, and you've got to do something that excites you. The thought of doing the content needs to be a source of excitement.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that, Pascal. And Simon, in response to Roger's comment about the sofa, he says, thing is, the sofa was never going to protect you from a darling. That's so true. Now, I'm going to bring up the next...
I was going to mention very briefly that in France, when Doctor Who was around, we had no idea what was going on. I thought people were asking a question. There's a doctor who's forgotten his name. What's going on? And when we saw what was available back then, and we thought, nah, we're not going to leave that to the Brit. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Pascal. So that brings me on to the next segment, and this is best described with this little video that I'm going to bring up. Back to the FOMO. Now, Roger, Pascal, it's been absolutely incredible talking to you both. We've talked a lot about Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, of course. We've talked about how we can learn from films in how we can generate that buzz, that excitement, that FOMO into our marketing. And this is just a little insight into the kind of customers and clients that you work with. So, Roger, this is just a selection of some of the people that you work with, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to because I have a history of working in financial services. As you would expect, quite a few of my clients still tend to be financial services companies, and at least those financial services companies are aware of the fact that their stuff is mindlessly complicated and horrifically convoluted, and they are prepared to have a look at trying to simplify things. But I think the speaking part of it has widened out my my reach a little bit. So I do work with companies outside of financial services now, and fitness industry and other areas as well, because ultimately the rules of marketing haven't really changed much. The tactics have changed. The tactics change all the time. If somebody releases a new piece of kit and a new piece of software, and of course we talk about that on Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast as well, the tactics might change, but the fundamentals of marketing, researching your customer, working out what their problem is, creating a product to fix that problem, and then promoting that solution, those are elements of marketing have never changed and never will. And it is actually quite a simple concept, really, when you get your head around it. It's just trying to help people realize that it doesn't need to be complicated. And if they keep it simple, then we can help them find a simple answer for their customers.
Fabulous. And Pascal, did you want to share a little insight into the kind of clients that you've been working with recently?
Yeah, and just as I was listening to Roger, I feel very lucky because it's such a wonderful profession, because you can navigate across sectors. You could, move from, as I did, from private sector to public sector, then to be self-employed and independent. And for my case, really, it's this idea of either I'm going to work with local government in the UK and in France to upskill small businesses and give them an unfair competitive advantage because they become better storytellers, but also importantly, they know where to dedicate time and ignore the marketing of online marketing, which is it's an important skill in its own right, as we discuss a lot on the podcast. I then obviously work with event organizers for speaking, engagement, and so on. I have my one-to-one clients, as I would call them, but I also, want to give a shout out to two actually charities. One is the Northeast Autism Society. I've been working with them now for 6, 7 years and helping them really do some amazing stuff, including recently 2 years ago winning an award for the best marketing campaign. And a shout out to Medicinema that we support, Roger and I, who essentially are in the business of bringing the film experience to cinema to make children and adults forget for a moment about their ailments. And that's just wonderful.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, chaps. Now we are going to go into the next section, which is shameless plug alert, FOMO shout out to first of all to Roger and to Pascal, and then also to all the fabulous people who have commented today. I'd love to hear from you too. So, Roger, if people would like to know more about you, this is where they can get in touch with you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Now, I always used to put Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called now as my immediate place of contact, because to be perfectly honest, Twitter was my favorite social media platform. I think it was the one that did genuinely feel like a social engagement, even though, yeah, some companies still broadcast on it. But ever since Musk started tampering with it, it just seems to have descended into a sort of polarizing pit of quite nastiness. So yeah, go to my website or look for me on LinkedIn, and as it's a shameless plug, I'll hold the book up as well. Cats, Mats and Marketing Plans is the book that is still available on Amazon. You can get it in paperback or hardback or Kindle, I probably should write the second edition at some point, because things have changed quite a bit since the pandemic, but it did get published in the first 6 months of the pandemic. So I did have a chance to alter it a little bit to take account of the new world that we live in. Yeah, so do get in touch if you want to keep your marketing simple, or you want a speaker who will help your audience keep their marketing simple.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Roger. And we've got a wonderful comment from Francis, who said this is a fantastic discussion. Really appreciate your feedback, Francis. And just whilst we talk a little bit about Pascal, Francis, if you just want to add a comment, just a little insight into what you do, I'd love to share that to the world as well. And for everyone else who have commented today, if you just want to add another comment just to explain to the world what it is you do, and I'll just pop that up as well. But before we do that, we'll have the fabulous Pascal. This is where people can get in touch with you. Is that right, Pascal?
That's correct. Yes, thank you very much. And whether indeed you want me to either present or facilitate a workshop on storytelling to kind of improve vastly the impact of your marketing, but also, there is a rather content-rich video blog now. Over the years, I've been interviewing lovely people that can give you some additional insight into what it means to be doing marketing in today's economy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pascal. And Francis is she works as a producer on hybrid events. Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing that. So do definitely get in touch with Francis. If you've got a hybrid event coming up, or you're thinking of running a hybrid event, then you definitely need to talk to Francis. And we've got the fabulous Guy Eastwood. He runs Surefire Laser Design Limited, creating bespoke and branded items with lasers. Laughing at my own joke there. Now, I do happen to know that the fabulous Simon, who's been entertaining us all this time, Simon is incredible at making your presentations not suck, basically. So he is wonderful at getting our story out of us. So if you've got a public speaking gig coming up and you need someone to look at your presentation, then definitely get in touch with Simon. And who else have we had today? We've got the fabulous Elaine. Now Elaine Hughes is a disability speaker and consultant. So if you want to know how to incorporate diversity, equity and inclusion into your workplace, then you definitely need to get in touch with Elaine. And we've also got Ian Farrer as well, who is a fabulous friend on Twitter as well as in person as well. And he also has a fabulous podcast, so definitely get in touch with Ian as well. Now, if I may be so bold to plug my own business, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I've got the Extra Shot podcast, which is a LinkedIn live audio show that I run every Friday with the fabulous Amanda Webb from Spider Working fame. And she does all the techie, geeky stuff. I just show up like a diva and share an opinion on this week's latest digital marketing news. We convert that into a podcast so that if you want to listen to it whilst you're driving anywhere, then you're more than welcome to do that. And it's the fabulous Jason Falls and his marketing podcast network community that hosts our Extra Shot show. And then I just want to give another shout out to cricketleaders.org.uk, who I have been working with for the past 3 years. I develop a training program for their young leaders in cricket clubs up and down the country. And they do an incredible job fundraising. And I've been teaching them how to incorporate social media as part of their fundraising in order to generate that buzz, that excitement, that FOMO. But that's enough of the plugging. plugging, I'll just bring up the last banner, which is to remind people where people can find Two Geeks and Marketing podcast. So if you do prefer to listen to the audio, that's where you can have a listen. Or if you're like me, I like to have it on the big screen, on video, on YouTube, whilst I'm having my lunch. Definitely go and check out Roger and Pascal on Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast. Well, chaps, thank you so much for your time today. It's been absolutely fabulous talking to you both. I know that a lot of people will learn a lot from our podcast today, and I really appreciate your time, chaps. I really, really do.
It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much for having us.
You are so welcome. This has been the FOMO Creator Show. My name is Making Sang, first name May King. And if I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.